The Long Road to Justice, E. Jean Carroll's story, when the world still looked away back in the mid-90s. Manhattan was a different beast. The city hummed with that pre-internet energy where scandals stayed buried and powerful men's secrets rarely saw daylight. E. Jean Carroll was riding high then. Her advice column in Elle magazine had made her a household name. The kind of woman who could make you laugh while telling you hard truths about love, life, and everything in between. She was sharp, funny, fearless in print. But life has a way of testing even the strongest among us. That day at Bergdorf Goodman started like any other shopping trip. The luxury department store on Fifth Avenue was her turf. She knew the place like the back of her hand. Felt comfortable in those gleaming halls filled with designer everything. When she bumped into Donald Trump that afternoon, he was just another recognizable face from New York's social circuit. Real estate mogul, sure, but not yet the larger-than-life figure he'd become. Just a guy with money and that particular brand of New York swagger. What happened next in that dressing room would haunt Carroll for decades. In those 6 minutes, that's all it took. 6 goddamn minutes, her world tilted off its axis. Trump's hands, his weight, the violence of it all. The way he just ... took what he wanted, like she was nothing. Like her no meant nothing. The aftermath was almost worse than the assault itself. Carroll stumbled out of that dressing room in a daze, her mind already working overtime to make sense of what had just happened. She called her friend Lisa Birnbach, voice shaking as she tried to explain. But even then, even with a friend she trusted, the words felt impossible. This was 1996, remember, before #MeToo, before anyone gave a damn about what happened to women behind closed doors. The advice she got: keep quiet. Don't rock the boat. Who's gonna believe you anyway? So Carroll did what millions of women have done throughout history. She swallowed the pain, locked it away, and tried to move on. But trauma doesn't just disappear because you ignore it. It festers, grows, changes you in ways you don't even realize until years later. She threw herself into her work, became even funnier, even sharper in her writing. As if she could laugh away the darkness that had settled in her chest. The silence that screams for over 2 decades. Carroll carried that secret like a stone in her shoe, always there, always causing pain, but something she'd learned to live with. She watched Trump's rise from New York playboy to reality TV star to political figure, each appearance on her television screen like a punch to the gut. Here was her rapist, becoming more famous, more powerful, more untouchable with each passing year. The really twisted part. She had to watch people celebrate him. Had to sit through dinner parties where folks talked about The Apprentice like it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Had to bite her tongue when people said he was entertaining or tells it like it is. If they only knew what he was really like when the cameras weren't rolling. Carroll's career continued to flourish. But there was always this shadow following her around. Relationships became complicated. How do you explain to someone why you freeze up at certain touches, why crowded department stores make you break out in a cold sweat? She dated, sure, but intimacy felt like navigating a minefield. Every man who got too close, too fast, triggered memories she'd rather forget. Her friends noticed changes too. The woman who used to be fearless in her opinions became more careful, more guarded. She'd flinch at unexpected noises, always positioning herself near exits at parties. The assault had rewired her brain in ways she was only beginning to understand. Then came 2016, and suddenly her rapist was running for president. Carroll watched in horror as Trump gained momentum, as people actually considered putting this man in the most powerful office in the world. She'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had some moral obligation to speak up. But the stakes felt impossibly high. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the entire country. Finding her voice in a new world. By 2017, everything had changed. Harvey Weinstein's downfall opened the floodgates, and suddenly women everywhere were saying, "Me too." Carroll watched from the sidelines as brave women stepped forward, sharing their stories of assault and harassment. Each testimony felt like a validation of her own experience. Proof that she wasn't crazy, wasn't making it up, wasn't asking for it like she'd been conditioned to believe. The hashtag #MeToo movement gave Carroll something she'd never had before. Context. She realized her experience wasn't unique, wasn't some isolated incident she should be ashamed of. Trump's pattern of behavior toward women was becoming clearer every day. From the Access Hollywood tape to the growing list of accusers, she wasn't alone in this. But knowing you're not alone and finding the courage to speak up are two very different things. Carroll spent months wrestling with the decision. She was in her 70s now, supposedly past caring what people thought, but the fear was still there. What if nobody believed her? What if they destroyed her reputation? What if Trump's army of lawyers came after her? The tipping point came when she started working on her book, What Do We Need Men For? Writing about the men who had shaped her life, for better and worse, forced her to confront the Trump chapter she'd been avoiding. Her editor pushed her, gently but persistently. You can't write about the worst men in your life and leave out the worst thing that happened, she said. And Carroll knew she was right. Speaking truth to power, when the book excerpt ran in New York Magazine in June 2019. The response was immediate and brutal. Carroll had expected backlash. You don't accuse a sitting president of rape without consequences, but the intensity still shocked her. Trump's denial came fast and characteristically crude. She's not my type. As if attraction was a prerequisite for assault. As if reducing her to her looks somehow invalidated her experience. The right-wing media machine kicked into high gear, dissecting every aspect of Carroll's life, her appearance, her credibility. They called her a publicity seeker, as if any woman would choose to endure this kind of scrutiny for fame. They questioned why she waited so long to come forward, conveniently ignoring decades of evidence about how trauma affects memory and disclosure. But something had shifted in the cultural landscape since the 90s. This time, Carroll wasn't alone. Journalists investigated her claims seriously. Other women came forward with their own Trump stories. Legal experts explained why delayed disclosure was normal, not suspicious. For every voice trying to tear her down, there seemed to be two more, lifting her up. Carroll's phone rang constantly, supporters, detractors, reporters, lawyers. She'd wake up to hundreds of messages, some offering encouragement, others threatening violence. The woman who'd once valued her privacy found herself thrust into the harsh glare of national spotlight. It was exhausting, terrifying, but also strangely liberating. The secret she'd carried for 23 years was finally out in the world, and she was still standing. The legal labyrinth. Carroll's initial defamation lawsuit in 2019 hit a wall when Trump's Justice Department argued he was acting in his official capacity as president when he denied her claims. It was a legal technicality that felt like another slap in the face, using the presidency itself as a shield against accountability for alleged crimes committed as a private citizen. But Carroll's legal team, led by attorney Roberta Kaplan, wasn't giving up. They knew the landscape was shifting. New York was changing its laws around sexual assault, extending the statute of limitations for survivors. The Adult Survivors Act, passed in 2022, opened a one-year window for claims that had previously been time-barred. Carroll watched these legal developments with a mixture of hope and trepidation. At her age, she wondered if she had the energy for a prolonged court battle. The stress was taking its toll: sleepless nights, constant anxiety, the weight of representing not just herself but all the women who'd been silenced by powerful men. But she'd come this far. She couldn't turn back now. The decision to file the civil lawsuit under the Adult Survivors Act felt like stepping off a cliff. This wasn't just about defamation anymore. This was a direct accusation of sexual assault, with all the legal and personal ramifications that entailed. Carroll knew Trump's team would come at her with everything they had. She steeled herself for the fight of her life. David versus Goliath. In a Manhattan courtroom, the civil trial that began in April 2023 was unlike anything America had seen before. Here was a former president facing a jury of ordinary New Yorkers, accused of one of the most serious crimes imaginable. The circus atmosphere outside the courthouse, protesters, media, curious onlookers, felt surreal to Carroll. All this chaos because she'd finally told the truth about what happened in that dressing room. Taking the witness stand was both terrifying and cathartic. Carroll had practiced this moment in her head for years, but actually sitting there, facing Trump's lawyers, feeling the weight of the jury's attention, nothing could have prepared her for that. She spoke clearly, calmly, recounting details she'd tried so hard to forget. The lingerie she was wearing, the way Trump slammed her against the wall, the sound of her own voice saying no over and over. Trump's lawyers did exactly what she'd expected. They attacked her credibility, her memory, her motives. They painted her as a fame-seeking opportunist, a bitter woman looking for a payday. They questioned why she hadn't screamed, hadn't fought harder, hadn't reported it immediately. All the classic victim-blaming tactics that had kept women silent for generations. But Carroll held her ground. She'd spent decades preparing for this moment, even if she hadn't realized it. Every therapy session, every conversation with friends, every moment of self-reflection had led to this, her chance to speak her truth in a forum that mattered. Before people whose job it was to weigh the evidence and decide what they believed, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned with their verdict, finding Trump liable for sexual abuse and defamation, Carroll felt something she hadn't experienced in 27 years. Vindication, not just for herself, but for every woman who'd been told her story didn't matter. Her pain didn't count, her voice didn't deserve to be heard. When words become weapons, you'd think winning a $5 million judgment would have been enough to shut Trump up. But that's not how bullies operate. Even after the verdict, he kept attacking Carroll on social media, calling her a nasty person and repeating the same lies that had gotten him in trouble in the first place. It was like watching someone stick their hand back into a fire after getting burned. Carroll's lawyers saw opportunity in Trump's continued defamation. They filed another lawsuit. This one focused specifically on the comments he'd made at a CNN town hall just one day after the verdict. Trump had doubled down, calling Carroll's allegations fake and made up, apparently unable to learn from his legal defeat. The second trial, in January 2024, was all about damages. The jury had already found Trump liable for defamation in the first case. Now they just had to decide how much his lies had cost Carroll. Her legal team painted a picture of a woman whose reputation had been systematically destroyed by the most powerful man in America, whose life had been turned upside down by his relentless attacks. The $83.3 million verdict was staggering, more money than most people could even conceptualize. But it wasn't really about the money. Not for Carroll. It was about the message that there are consequences for using your platform to destroy someone who's telling the truth about you. That power doesn't make you immune from accountability. Trump's reaction was predictably explosive. He called the verdict absolutely ridiculous and promised to appeal. His supporters dismissed it as a politically motivated attack. But for Carroll, watching him rage against the judgment felt oddly satisfying. Finally, after all these years, he was the one who seemed small and powerless. The weight of victory winning in court didn't erase the trauma, didn't magically heal decades of pain and silence. Carroll still had nightmares about that dressing room, still felt anxious in department stores, still carried the psychological scars of not just the assault, but the years of attacks that followed her decision to speak out. The money would help, she could afford better security, better therapy, maybe even a little peace of mind. But the real victory was in the precedent, the message it sent to other survivors and to powerful men who thought they were untouchable. You can run, you can hide behind lawyers and NDAs and threats, but eventually, the truth has a way of catching up with you. Carroll found herself in an unexpected role, not just a survivor, but a symbol of resistance. Women wrote to her from around the world, sharing their own stories, thanking her for her courage. It was overwhelming and humbling, and sometimes too much to bear. She'd never asked to be anyone's hero. She just wanted justice for herself. The appeals process dragged on, but Carroll felt a sense of closure she'd never expected to find. Trump's legal team threw everything they had at overturning the verdicts. But the evidence was too strong, the jury's findings too well supported. In late 2024, the appeals court upheld both judgments, finally bringing Carroll's long legal journey to an end. A different kind of ending today. Young Carroll is in her 80s, living a life she never could have imagined during those dark years of silence. The woman who once couldn't walk past Bergdorf Goodman without panic attacks now gives interviews on its doorstep, no longer hiding from her past but claiming ownership of her story. The irony isn't lost on her. She's more famous now for being a rape survivor than she ever was for her writing. It's not the legacy she would have chosen, but it's the one she's got, and she's decided to make the most of it. She speaks at conferences, mentors other survivors, uses her platform to advocate for changes in how the legal system handles sexual assault cases. Trump, meanwhile, faces his own The Carroll verdicts were just the beginning. Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and the constant specter of accountability following him wherever he goes. The man who once seemed untouchable is learning that gravity applies to everyone, even former presidents. Carroll's story has become part of American legal history, studied in law schools as an example of how the justice system can work, even when the odds seem impossible. But for her, it's simpler than that. It's proof that speaking truth to power isn't just a pretty phrase. It's something real people can do, even when they're scared, even when the world seems stacked against them. What we learned, the Jean Carroll case wasn't just about one woman's quest for justice. It was about testing whether our legal system could hold the most powerful accountable for their actions. It was about whether a woman in her 70s could take on a former president and win. It was about whether truth